Hello everyone, I'm Simon Ford of Ford's Gin. Martinis, gin and tonics, Negronis, great classic cocktails is what I'm about. But I also love to hear of great recipes from great bartenders from around the world, which is why we've partnered with Beyond the Drink for this season. Cheers.
Well, you just heard from the man himself, Simon Ford, and we are glad this season of Beyond the Drink is once again brought to you by our friends at Ford's Gin. I'm Cappy, and in this series, we're going behind the bar. It's time to explore the journeys of the world's best bartenders, uncovering their passion, the latest gin trends, and of course, the social impact they make in their community. Beyond the Drink airs every other week right here on Beyond the Plate. If you're new to the pod, welcome. If you've listened before, we're glad you're back. Let's go Beyond the Drink. Salute! After years of making waves in the global bar scene, and by global, we mean Amsterdam, Thailand, Norway, Barcelona, and likely more, today's guest is set to debut his latest venture in New York City. He has a history of transforming limitations into creative successes, as shown by earning the number 7 spot on the world's 50 best bars list for his bar in Barcelona. The new bar, opening later this year, promises to bring a fresh take on the cocktail experience. You can find more on him in the episode notes and follow him on Instagram at schmuck-or-die. Please enjoy this episode as we go beyond the drink with Moe Aljaff. Moe, thank you for being here. We start every episode with an audio test. So for you, would you name 3 schmucky things you love to use with gin?
Vermouth, obviously. Anything pickled. I'll probably put in an eau de vie as well.
Love it. You sound good. Let's do it. Moe, thanks for being here again. Why don't we start by telling everyone what you do?
I ask myself that sometimes as well. Myself and my partner Juliet, we've kind of become creative principals for the brand and the bar Schmuck, which we're about to launch now in New York. It is definitely a little bit of everything. We're handling everything creatively that has got to do with this business. Everything from the drinks to the interior, to the design, the atmosphere. And then we have our third partner, Dan Bink, who is probably one of the greatest operators that I know. Very, very happy to have him as a partner because what him and his other businesses are lending us is the logistics side of it. You know, they're helping us with creating and making sure that we're able to setting us up for success in a way that like we're creating a business with a good financial structure from the beginning, a good accounting structure from the beginning, and just a good way to approach the business. And I think that has become kind of myself and Juliet's new roles as we approach this new venture.
Can you share a snippet? We'd love to hear a little bit more. Your journey is extremely interesting to me. I'd love to share with our listeners how you got here.
I grew up in Sweden, basically. My family were refugees. We're Kurdish, Iraqi, and we were refugees from the Gulf War and everything that was happening in Iraq. We got to Sweden when I was like 3-4. I'm the youngest of 7. I grew up in Sweden, but I never really felt home in Sweden. And I think that's kind of the line that goes through this story is this thing where I was always, I guess, trying to look for home. And so I left Sweden at the ages of 18, 19. I started traveling and I picked up work in the nightlife industry. My first job really was like as a kamaki. Kamaki is in the Greek island. It's a Greek word for the people who stand outside the bars and you're the promoter outside who are trying to funnel these drunk people into this one bar. And then, you know, as it goes, I met someone there who was like, hey, there's cool jobs in Amsterdam. Moved to Amsterdam on a whim. And I ended up working again as like a promoter job. I was giving out flyers for a pub crawl. And one of the bars in the pub crawl was looking for bartenders at one time. So I started working at that bars in the red light district. So that was my first bar. And it was a really cool kind of high volume dive bar. And after a couple of years in Amsterdam, I kind of picked up on the sense that, hey, if I speak English and if I can do bartending, I think I can go with it almost anywhere. And like most people in their early 20s, I read some cool book about travel and I was like, fuck it, I'm traveling. And so I booked a one-way ticket to India.
Why India?
I have no idea. It just made sense. And I bought a motorbike in India. I lived in India for a year, riding my motorbike around from village to village and just kind of like exploring that. I ended up in Thailand and picked up a bar job there in one of the islands called Koh Tao. And then basically I couldn't leave Thailand. I was stuck there on a visa. I'd overstayed my visa. If you overstay your visa in Thailand, you had to pay a penalty when you leave in the airport. If you can't pay the penalty, you spend 30 days in a Thai jail. And I couldn't pay that. And I was overstaying. I was really, really broke. 23 years old. Very, very stupid. And my old boss from Amsterdam bailed me out. And so I got back to Europe. I moved up to Norway. And then in Norway, I worked as a barista because I was like trying all the stuff. And the guys who owned the cafe was the same group that opened a bar called Himkok. It's like one of the world's best bar. It's a great, great venue. It's a great place. And so I was part of the opening team in that. And I learned a lot, about what this world is. And they kind of introduced me to a lot of it. I joined a cocktail competition called Bacardi Legacy. And in that competition, they kind of give you a little budget to do like a marketing campaign. It's not much. It's like $3,000. But it was the first time someone had given me a budget and said, go create your own IDs. I was like, okay, this is what I like to do. I like to come up with an ID and create it. It went really well for me in that competition. I placed like number 3 in the world, or top 3 in the world. I decided to kind of ride that wave and to move to Barcelona with it. And myself and the guy I worked with in Norway, we got to Barcelona with not much of a plan. We had very, very low budget, very low money, and we found a little dive bar, and it was like the floor was uneven, the ceiling was leaking, it was all shitty. And so we put together all the money we had, and with all the money we had, we could just like get the license for the bar, get the keys, so to speak. We only had like $2,000 to renovate the bar after we had paid everything up. So we created our first concept, which is Two Schmucks. It was only supposed to be called Two Schmucks because we couldn't afford anyone to work in the bar. And so we were like, oh, we'll call it Two Schmucks as long as there's only us two. But then after a certain point, when we have money to renovate it and to hire a bunch of people, we'll kind of change the name. So it was only us two, myself and AJ, working there like 6 days a week. The bar started gaining a lot of success, and it's like where we came up with the idea of the 5-star dive bar. Because we were like, we can have great produce, we can have great service, we can have a great product. But, it's in an environment of a dive bar and of a really kind of, shitty old place. And in that, we realized as well a lot of things, about what makes a great bar. And when you see that a bar is a reflection of its owner, it's usually typically great. When it's a true, no lies, honest reflection of its owner, you can't go wrong when that happens. When a lot of people came to Two Schmucks in the beginning, they would be like, oh, this looks like a living room. And it was literally because I emptied my living room and I put it in the bar, because we didn't have any furniture. But then we also realized that that's the kind of a great setting for a bar. That's kind of a great way to do it. And it was a reflection of who we were, myself and AJ. And so we were working on this bar. We renovated it eventually. It grew. We had gotten a lot of accolades and articles as Two Schmucks. At a certain point, we decided we have to keep the name. And fuck it, if 5 guys are doing it, we're doing it. And we basically, in 2020, my partner decided that he wanted, to change industries. I was like, well, this is the time to do it. Pandemic, a lot of people have a lot of time to kind of reevaluate their choices in life and so on. And so we had a third partner who helped us get all the paperwork and all the licensing. And then he just helped us find the people who were like building some of the stuff. But he was no part of like the branding or the operation or the bars or anything at all. And so I kind of went to him and I said, well, all right, well, AJ's out. And I'm going to stay and I'm going to make sure the doors are open and people are coming in again. And I think I'm out as well. I'm out to New York. And then he came a little bit later, maybe a week, 2 weeks, with this offer from some VCs. Because I think what happened during the pandemic is that a lot of VCs it's as basic as buy low, right? And if the pandemic did anything to the restaurant and bar industry, is that it made its valuation incredibly low. And so I think a lot of them were like on the prowl to be like, all right, let's go for a lot of these businesses. We know this is going to be over one day or another. Let's go and put in a lot of money into these kind of places, and then we'll just kind of do that. That's my opinion in hindsight. So they came with an offer to kind of put in a lot of money to save the business and to also go for a new site. It was kind of like, I guess I saw it as like, oh, maybe this is like, oh, let's give it one last chance. At this time, Juliette had already started working with us as a manager for Two Schmucks. In the beginning, she moved in January 2020, and she didn't leave when the pandemic started. So myself and her mainly created the programs for everything new. We created a new bar called Fat Schmuck, which was mainly focused on the terrace because of the pandemic. It had a big terrace seating and some indoor seating as well. I focused a little bit on a day and night program with food and drinks. And then we created a third site called Lucky Schmuck, which is more of like a dive bar. It was like around 2021 in the summer, and it was like people were ready to go out and get wild again, get close to each other and so on again. We wanted to create that site, had like a karaoke room and so on. This site was actually a reflection of my time in Amsterdam red light district in my early 20s. So it had like a lot of red neon, and like a lot of like inspirations was from those kind of bars that I used to work back then. And so we ran that. And in the summer of 2020, so in the beginning of 2022, obviously all that stuff was happening between like Russia and Ukraine. And it turns out these VCs that had put in a lot of this money, they had made most of their money in Russia. And when that happened, a lot of the financials for a lot of people in Russia started becoming a little bit tight. Some money was locked up. The banks weren't sending money. It was, I don't know the exact details of it, but they got a lot more uptight. And so they started wanting to go in and kind of decide and dictate how the business should be run. You know, certain salaries that was promised to some people that we had raised the revenue of the business with like 800-900. And so basically we had some costs to take care of, but obviously to keep the great people that we wanted to keep, we needed to make sure that, you know, they were all paid. And they started going in and they wanted to cut all of that. They wanted to like, you know, do like absolute minimal spending. Basically run it like a shitty kind of hospitality, like a VC would run a hospitality place. And when we pushed back, they kind of made it known that when we had signed for the third place, they had put in a thing in the contract that had given over, because we had brand control or veto rights on everything that regarded the brand. So by lowering the quality or not paying people enough, that would affect the brand. And they made it known to us that they had revoked the veto rights on that. Between the second and third venue, they had put that into the contract. And we just didn't do our due diligence in going through the contract properly. So when we realized that, we said, fuck this, we're out. Myself and Juliet left. And then we basically, slowly worked our way. We did a pop-up, we did a residency, we moved over to the US. And when we got to New York, it was like home. It felt so much more like the whole idea with me looking for a home and traveling all over and trying to find it. Even when we were in Barcelona, I always understood it was temporary. It wasn't really as expecting. South of Europe can be a little bit, there's a lot of kind of institutional, I don't know if it's the right word for it. There's definitely racism there that's a little bit open. And it's not like when you're walking around in the street, although you can experience it a lot when you walk around in the street, specifically if you're Arabic in Spain because of the relationship that they have with Morocco. But it's mainly in like government stuff, with bank stuff. When you go and want a license, or we're never allowed to, for example, be a part of like the community board, even though we had 3 bars on the same street. So there was always this feeling of like not of acceptance, basically. I mean, there's already right now in Barcelona, they're like spray tagging everywhere, like for foreigners to go home. They're not keeping it quiet. And I think this is something that kind of exists a little bit unlike the south of Europe. And you definitely felt a lot when you were there. But it was very temporary. Everything felt very, very temporary. And when we got to New York, it was like, okay, fuck, this feels so good. It was important to me that it felt good for Juliet because, you know, she was going to be my partner and she didn't like Barcelona as well. She loved Paris. And so it was important for me that she would like it because it's like, you have to love the city that you're in, you know, when you're going to do a bar or restaurant. And furthermore, it was like, I would walk down the street and I would see an old person. I would like see myself in them. I would be like 100% that's going to be me one day. You know, I was never able to do that anywhere else in the world. But when I was walking around New York and I see this old person who looked a little bit crusty and he maybe had a dog or whatever, and I would be like, that'll be me. That will 100% be me one day. And more than that, when we came here and we were starting to look for a site and look for a bar, they told me the first thing you have to do is to go in front of a community board because they are the ones who are going to make sure that you get your liquor license. Because the SLA goes on the recommendation of the community board. They've kind of delegated that job to the community board because there's so many bars that want a liquor license, right? And so they're like, they give it to each community board. And so the SLA 99% of the time goes on the community board's recommendation. And so I was like, oh, we get to go in front of a community board. I was happy about it. And the people I knew who was bar operators in New York, they're like, yeah, it sucks. Because, you know, you have to convince them, I was like, we wanted to go be in a community board meeting in Barcelona. We were not even allowed. You know, like I went to a bunch of community board meetings before it was our time to go in front of them. I just wanted to be a part of the process and see the process. You got to find out so much about New York and about the neighborhood. You got to find out who's opening, what they're doing, what they're trying to do. And basically what happened is we got in front of this board For me, it was beautiful because I was looking at the board of like, there was an Australian guy, there was an Indian girl, there was a Chinese girl, there was a guy with like South American background. There's people from all over the world that like made up this board. And we stood in front of them and we told them our entire case. And I actually have the video because I recorded it kind of in, I had my phone down by my waist and I recorded it. And every one of them, and it hadn't happened that whole day, but when it came to the voting, every one of them voted yes. And that was when it was like, fuck yeah, this is home. This kind of like crazy radical feeling of like acceptance and of like, hey, like, fuck yeah, you guys are accepted. Fuck yeah, we want you guys here. Come here and build this place, you know? And I think for me, rather than for a lot of other people, of like being on this journey and dealing with the shit in Spain and like leaving home at a certain time. And I think I've always been like bouncing around, not finding this, but then being in front of these people from all these different parts of the world and then having them like do this, it was like this most beautiful moment. And I still attribute it to the moment when I was like, I'm going to be here forever. And it's just this incredible feeling of like this place that's like when you walk around in New York, you can feel that it's like it was built by immigrants. It was built for immigrants. And the people who inhabit it are all immigrants. And it's like if the term immigrant was a country, then this would be its capital. And as someone who's always felt like a bit of an outsider or an immigrant throughout my entire life, this was like, okay, this is the home for the people who are the outsiders, who feel like the immigrants, who feel like they don't have a home. This is the place where all those people feel at home. So that was like a great foundation to be like, cool, now let's build it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing all that. And it really just puts things into perspective because you came from somewhere where you were not able to be involved in that part of the process and were kind of shut out from it to something where here, a typical American is like, oh crap, I got to go in front of the community board. And to your point, you're like, that's amazing. That's opportunity. And that's like part of your story that like a person coming into your new bar may never like hear, but it, you know, contributes to your journey and success in a way, you know.
The comparison that I would do about that is that in Spain, we did a lot of great achievements with the bar and we achieved so much stuff. But it was like bad that we weren't Spanish in getting these achievements. We got asked to do a TV interview once and then had it canceled when they found out we weren't Spanish. Even though we were like, we speak Spanish, like we can do the interview. And they were like, oh, sorry, we thought you guys were Spanish. Like if that would have happened in the States, that would have been, I don't know, maybe a lawsuit. If a Vietnamese family would move to the States and they wouldn't speak English and they would create one of the best restaurants in the States, they would be carried on shoulders and celebrated. These motherfuckers don't even speak the language, came here, hustled their ass off, and fucking killed it. And like, you celebrate each other, you celebrate the hustle, and you celebrate that immigrant mentality. And it was the opposite. You know, it's like, don't brag about your achievements. And if you got the achievement, but you're not from here, fuck off. You know, it felt a lot like that, you know, and it was like at a certain point as well, we were like, you know, it's the greatest market in the world and we love to be a part of it. And now we feel really like home here. It was like we felt that we had a team and we had something that was ready for like the big leagues, quote unquote. But like we were in this other kind of smaller market. And so it was just like everything made sense about this move. And so I'm happy in hindsight, obviously. Like with everything that's shitty that happens to you, you only find out in hindsight about like why that happened to you. And I'm happy that all that shit went down in Barcelona because it's like this feeling that we have right now at home and this feeling that we have right now about building this place. And I'm doing it with Juliette as my partner who's equally into it. And with Dan, who's like, I couldn't ask for a better team than these two people to be with me. That's kind of like, I feel really happy every day about the fact that that's what's happening.
When you opened Two Schmucks in Barcelona, you know, you basically poured everything you have into that, including your living room, literally. But like, were you afraid at all to open the doors? Like, is anybody going to come to this? Or how do you get the word out?
So up until when I opened Two Schmucks in Barcelona, I had been homeless. Really homeless, not like I'm crashing at my friend's couch homeless, but really like I don't know where I'm gonna sleep tonight 3 times, and I'd bounced back from it 3 times, and I think that gave me this incredible, like this very fearless kind of fuck it, you know, if we're gonna walk on ice, we might as well dance. Let's just fucking run. Let's just fucking go kind of thing. Because I was like, if everything goes to shit, if I lose everything, I'll bounce back. I've done it 3 times before. So every time that happened to me, it gave me more and more confidence about like not caring so much about failure, about understanding that it's not the end of the world. Actually, it might sound cheesy, but I was reading this book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. There's this great quote about it that said, it can't break you if it doesn't break your character. And I think that's very, very true. Like, unless it fucks with who you are as a character, it won't fuck with you, you know? So unless it's like damage, there's some damage that you go through in life that will forever change you as a person, you know? But unless it fucks with that, it won't fuck with you. And I got this fearlessness and I got this kind of thing of doing it. But there was a moment that is a very, very cool memory where I was laying on the floor of the bar. Not a single person walked in. And I was just laying there like, what the fuck are we doing? Just laying, looking up and going like, I have no idea, like, what the hell's happening? But we just started to like work on it slowly. I didn't know what to do in the beginning. I kind of went back to my old ways. I was like, maybe we need to have a person outside that tries to push people in. We did a drum and bass party once. We tried everything, you know, we tried everything to get people. And I think, you know, it's just persistence. And in the beginning, we got a lot of word of mouth. We didn't know how to do social media either. Like, we just had our phones and everything was made very, very cheap. We did our menus in Microsoft Paint. And it wasn't because like AJ knew a little bit how to work Photoshop. But it's like we couldn't afford a computer good enough to run Photoshop. All our computers were shit. We had this old ass computers that, you know, so we just did these Microsoft Paint kind of menus and everything was very, very cheap. But slowly, we just kind of worked on it. And we got a little bit more people and a little bit more people and a little bit more people. And
true word of mouth.
Yeah, pretty much. And that started 2017. And then slowly we started learning a little bit about these devices and how to tell your story throughout social media and throughout photography and throughout videography. And then when AJ left in 2020, I started doing photography and videography.
Beautiful stuff, by the way. I saw on your website. Fucking gorgeous, man. Yeah.
Thank you. Like, I realized this is just another language where we can speak with people and we can just explain who we are. And instead of us communicating our vision to someone with a day rate of $500 to $1,000 and then hoping, it was explained to me once that every time you try to communicate an ID to someone, you have to see it as 2 funnels. You got all your IDs up here and you take it through this little funnel that's either oral or verbal or like written down. And that's a tiny funnel where you communicate everything that's up here in your head. And then what they do is that's like a reverse funnel. They get that little bit of information in and then that unpacks into another explanation into their heads. And so to get that right, it's like you almost need to be lucky. Yeah, it's like to get another creator that understands the vision exactly right and wants to communicate what you want to do. That its own, never mind if you're paying the money for it, that its own is like hard enough. So we understood that by learning it, we could just take what's in here and we can just immediately put it into photography or videography because we knew how to do that. So it was another way for us to kind of speak and to kind of express ourselves and who we are. And then for myself, I realized that I think in this life, you always look for what you want to do, what you're meant to do, and what you're trying to do. And I realized that the whole thing about like, it's about the journey, not about the destination and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is like cheesy and so on, but it's true because it is, you know. But I realized that I love creating, and as long as I'm creating, I get into like a timeless flow where it could be 5 minutes or 5 hours. I don't pay cents to it. I don't pay mind to it, and it doesn't matter what it is. Like, I can be building a table, I could be making a cocktail, I could be helping with a dish, or I could be doing the interiors for the bar, or I could be editing a video, creating a photo. They all these things hit the same nerve. And it hits the same kind of like, yeah, this feels good and I want to keep doing this. Of like, as long as I'm creating, I'm happy. And slowly as you come and get into your early 30s, you kind of understand that, okay, I need to create an environment that fosters the creativity and allows me to just create. You know, when me, Dan, and Juliet are speaking about what we're doing, is kind of like, well, we're strongest in a place where we're creating. Allow us to create the menus, to create the bar, to create this, to create that. And maybe we're not strongest in like the logistics or in the background, but that's where Dan comes in because they're amazing at that. That's what I really value about this partnership, is that it helps us to create an environment that fosters our strengths, and allows us to do more of that and allows us to develop.
What makes you happy about being behind the bar?
People. I think people a lot of times get it wrong. And I think our business is a people business. And I think that's it. I loved bars when I did dive bars, and there was nothing with cocktails. Yeah, the craziest cocktail was that I used rum and Malibu before putting in the Coke,
Is like your new school, Two Schmucks in Barcelona or forthcoming bar, is it inspiration-wise based on what you know and saw growing up in these various countries of dive bars?
Yeah, I think so. Well, this might sound a little bit bloaty, a little bit too cocky, but I think generally that because of the travel and because of the experience that I had, I like my taste and I trust my taste. And I think that when I find something that I really like a dish or a drink that I really like, I think that when we give it to other people, they usually end up really liking it as well. And I just trust that. And so when it comes to the cocktails and so on, a lot of it is inspired by dishes, by food, by a lot of flavors. But I think some of it is also taking with a sense of there's nothing right or wrong, because I kind of got into this industry with that kind of playful, whatever, you think you can do that? Fuck it, yeah, let's do it. In the beginning, I guess there was a little bit of they're gonna like this or not, but we just kept doing what we knew how to do, and I was like, I like this, I think people will like it, and we just gave that to people, and then that worked. And then we're like, every time I'm equally surprised. Holy shit, that worked, they like it. And so at a certain point, you have to kind of allow yourself to get that confidence to be like, hey, I think that I like talking to myself, hey, I think when you do create something that you think is good, I think other people also like it. More often than not. Sometimes, it's a hit and a miss, but more often than not, they will. And then I have my other amazing partner, Juliette, who's she comes from a culinary background. She used to be a sous chef in a Michelin star restaurant. She has so many different aspects of it, and she likes so many different aspects of it. And I think us pushing and pulling, because you got to have a challenger to all your opinions,
How's that creative process? You guys in the middle of development or are you guys in a good place?
Yeah. It's great. And it's just the right amount of push and pull. And we're very honest with each other with I don't like this. It's we'll just straight up be like, I don't like it. But if you really like it, let's go to 10 people that we trust. Let's run it through the thing and let's see how we like it. And, we R&D it a lot like that. And sometimes when we don't agree, we don't shy away. We're not afraid to invite in some good friends and be like, we need your opinion. We need your help to kind of help us decide about this. But as both of us grow within this, we kind of I think I'm giving to Juliette that high volume production sense when it comes to the cocktail. And she's giving me a more kind of high quality, a more of a culinary approach of kind of creating it. And so when she comes to me with a drink one time, I point out the holes of we're never going to be able to make 200 of these a night, and that's this and this and this. And then when I come to her with something, she's like, yeah, but you're using a technique that takes 3 times longer. We can just do this or we can just do that, and we can get there in a faster way. We can get there in a better way. We have a really good balance when it comes to that because of my background and her background. It's sous chef, Michelin star restaurant, dive bars in the red light district, and it's kind of it works with each other. And then the one thing that she has as well, coming from a culinary background, which is a little bit unusual, I think, is that she's very social and she's very outwards and she's very happy to be speaking with people and entertaining them whilst creating. You have a lot of chefs that whilst they're creating, whilst they're cooking, they don't want people looking at them or talking to them or so on. But she has that. And I think that's why she decided, a bar is a better fit to me than a kitchen. But yeah, it works really, really good.
You've been to and worked in a lot of different countries. Is there, not to be cliche, but do you have a go-to cocktail for yourself?
I think it's very circumstantial. I think it's there's definitely go-to cocktails that I have depending on the weather and where I am and the mood. If I'm in the Seychelles, which we were in a year ago, immediately it was a pina colada or a mojito. It's like, yes, of course, it's going to be these two drinks. I'm not going to have in Manhattan. But if it's like a rainy winter night and you're like in a basement bar in Manhattan, then yeah, a stirred whiskey cocktail is the way to go. You know, it's like a warming, kind of embracing, kind of cool cocktail. Typically a 50-50 gin martini is like my go-to in the most usual settings. I love that. And I think the more you start working with cocktails, the more you go like, all right, keep it to 2 ingredients, you know. It doesn't need to be too complicated. And
yeah. What's anything exciting to you these days in the world of gin?
I think it's basically, well, I love the work that Simon and the guys are doing. I think they're keeping it solid but straightforward. And I love these little tweaks that they do with the sherry cask aged. You know, I think that's just really, really good collaborations and really good in what they do. But at the end of the day, I see a lot of the spirits as a base. If you look at it from like a food point of view, I see it as like, all right, we start with potatoes, or we start with rice, or we start with this is the protein, or this is the base, and then you build everything around it. And you know, something like vodka for me is a bit more like a canvas, a bit more like a blank piece of paper. And then as you go into different spirits, this piece of paper takes on more of a texture and more of a form and more of an identity, you know. Like if you have this rough textured canvas that you're painting on, yeah, maybe that's a bourbon. But if you have just a blank sheet of blank paper with nothing on it, that's probably a vodka. You're starting blank. And you can add any flavor to vodka. You can do anything. It's whatever, you know. So it's kind of like, I see it a little bit, I approach it kind of like that. And honestly, in the last years, because we've been sleeping on couches and working out of little kitchenettes and not like have tools to create anything and not have a budget to do R&D, our cocktails again has taken on a different form. We did a pop-up in Mexico with some friends at Limontor a while ago. And they said, your cocktails, they actually made me realize this. They said, your cocktails only have like one spirit or one ingredient. And then the rest is like other stuff. And I was like, yeah, I guess they do. And then I realized it's because, we couldn't afford the liqueurs and the Amaros and everything else. You know, we could only afford like the fresh produce and so on. And we were doing it in our kitchens. So as we were creating our cocktails, we were like, we had one spirit. And we were like, the brand gave us a couple of these bottles. This is what we're doing it with. There's no other liquors. And so it's like we had one cocktail, for example, that we created recently that was called Le Banane. And it was like a cocktail that was supposed to be just an expression of like pure banana. So we just dissected the banana. We just had rum, and we made rum with tonka beans to give it that little rounded vanilla-ish kind of spiced vanilla kind of flavor. And then we made banana juice with Pectinex. So it was clear, very transparent, very light banana juice. But the banana juice only comes out with sweetness. And we were like, but bananas aren't 100% sweet, because I eat a lot of bananas, and Juliet makes fun of me for that. So I was like, I know they have acidity, I know they have a different thing. So to try to reach this acidity of the banana, we were messing around with different acids, again, which is a cheap product that you can get. And so we found our answer in a mix of tartaric acid and malic acid, so a little bit of apple and grape acid. We combined that a little bit, and we found the acid that was akin to the banana. And then we also said that it was a little bit starchy, and we found this Japanese toasted genmai rice. And so we made a cordial with that rice and the acid to give it the starch and the acidity. We had the sweetness from the banana juice, and we had the tonka bean to round it all out, to round the spirit out. But we're talking about we had one spirit, and then everything else was modifiers. And so that's what most of our cocktails have been looking like recently, because we just couldn't afford any other.
Well, it's like I forgot the exact quote about creativity comes out when you're limited, or like you being limited
is a source of creativity.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, this is like the dive bar that we had was a source of us being creative with our service and our products and creating the 5-star dive bar. This is another version of that, where we couldn't afford to pay for all the liqueurs and Amaros. We couldn't afford any of that. We just had a bottle of vodka or a bottle of rum or a bottle of gin. And then we were like, okay, well, we can go to a supermarket, and then we can get some acids, and we can get some rice, and we can get some of this. And all of those products in combination is cheaper than a bottle of liquor or a bottle of liqueur or a bottle of spirit.
It's kind of your brand.
So then that became our R&D. That we were like, we had another drink that was called strawberry, the scene from Ratatouille with strawberry and cheese, which me and Juliet both liked. And it was the scene that is akin to like every chef or cocktail bartender or someone, first time they understand flavor combination. He eats the strawberry, he eats the cheese. There's red fireworks that go with the strawberry, yellow fireworks, and then he eats them together and he understands flavor combination. And I had a similar experience with a chef making me eat blue cheese, drink a bit of Calvados, and then have them together. And me understanding that this apple brandy and this blue cheese, holy fuck, together is so amazing. You know, I could never make a cocktail with it because blue cheese is horrible in cocktails. But I tried so hard, but it was so good. But so we made this cocktail. It was made with tequila. And again, we infused it with tonka beans to give it a bit of spice and edge it off. But again, this was because we had tonka beans already as an ingredient in our kitchen. We didn't have a lot of ingredients. We did the strawberry juice the same way we did the banana juice. Because again, we had the Pectinex, we had the blender to do the light juice, to do the transparent juice. But then we used the Parmesan cheese powder to give that cheese flavor. And then we also added the Parmesan cheese powder into a milk. We mixed that and then we made the milk punch. And so we gave it the whey texture. We gave it the whey protein that added that mouthfeel of cheese. Had a bit of the tanginess, the umami from the Parmesan, and it had the strawberry. But we're talking about one spirit and then milk and cheese powder and tonka bean and strawberries.
Sounds so damn good. I'm literally looking in my phone as you're talking because I recently had a dish with strawberries and cheese on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like this combination of like the cheesecake and it's like this combination for us made sense, but I wanted to approach it in a way where it wasn't heavy on the cheese. I didn't want it to be a heavy, cheesy drink. This is another way that we've approached the cocktail making because of our limitations, because we've been in these little kitchens and we haven't been able to afford it. And that's been the case of everything that we've done.
All right, Mo, we want to talk about giving back and social impact a little bit. My listeners know we celebrate that with every episode, whether it's a chef or bartender, learning how you all do it, whether it's a cause or an organization, whatever it may be, you all have your own way. So we'd love to give you a moment to shed some light on a cause or organization that you maybe want to raise awareness for. Can you share how you may give back or any story you've seen, as it relates to social impact during your career?
Yeah, I mean, in Barcelona, we were kind of trying to work a lot with trying to look at the education and look at what we're trying to do within that city as we had these bars and so on. And I've always said, be a part of the neighborhood, but add something new to it. And I hope, and I think that that's what we want to do as we start opening up here, that we want to create these events where we're able to probably once a month put on some kind of event where we're able to kind of raise some money and then we can choose a cause of what we believe is hard to do. Not like necessarily a city away or a country away or whatever, but directly in our community. Because I think a lot of people, it's very easy to care about what's happening in politics, who's going to be the next president, who's going to do the next thing. And I think the real politics that matter and the real stuff that matter is the one of your close community. Like who's in your community board, that matters. Who's kind of, what's happening down the street with fucking Bob or Larry, that matters. I think that matters a lot and I really care about that. And so I'm really hoping that we will have a chance to do this. I've seen some of these block parties here where they get a permission from the community board to close off the street. They put out some barbecue, they do some stuff, and I've looked at that and it's like all these seeds in my head. I'm like, oh man, this can be so cool when we can do it. So we're kind of looking at something like that.
All right, closing it out. When it comes to etiquette, curious, one thing we should never do in a bar and one thing we should always do in a bar. And I know there's plenty more than one probably, but what do you think?
Oh, yeah, spicy one. I think one thing I always like to do is that I always like to personally thank the people who either created my dish or my drink. If it's just sometimes we just go by the kitchen and just say, hey, thank you. Just I'm not going to bother you. Not try to take their time because I know they might be in a rush, but just go and say thank you. Specifically to the guys in the kitchen, man, because I think they love when they get some love. If someone just pops by and says, hey man, that was fucking delicious. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And one thing that you shouldn't do, well, there's a long list of the things that you shouldn't do. Just, if you're sitting at the bar, don't touch the shit, man.
That's a recurring answer. I like it.
Yeah. Just look at the work, look at what's happening. Don't touch the shit. And, work on your communicate to your waiter game. But, like, just get it. Like, obviously, I fucking hate that. Hey, or like the snapping of your fingers or so on. Sometimes myself and friends discuss, like, oh, what's your go-to get the waiter's attention game? I'm like, do you do the raised eyebrows with the chin up? Or do you do the finger up with like the mouth open? Or do you do this? Work on that game. Make something good. Just don't be rude about it. Just do something that's like creative and cool where like, hey, I can get his attention, but in a non-rude way. And like, I can, because we want something extra, or like whatever.
Mo, thank you, dude. Thank you. This was awesome. I loved hearing your journey. Your points of view is so strong, like in a great way, just like where you came from to where you are. Super excited for the next spot.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
For sure. I'll be there towards the end of the year.
Amazing. Hopefully I'll be able to welcome you in our home. I think this is a given, and I think everyone says this, and I think people always have to say this because you never get it when you're in it. But like, you do start to understand more and more about this shit as you get older. And I think every time when you're in the craziness, you just don't see it. And I think if I would be able to give any advice to anyone is that just as long as you have this feeling of like just this complete honest kind of thing that you want to work on, just honestly work on, not like, hey, I want to do this because it's cool, or I want to do this because that, just something that's like 100% honest to yourself. I think if you just keep doing it, a way will be found. And then it will be like, oh man, I'm so happy I went through that bullshit because I got to where I am. And it's not always like that, but I think it's definitely been like that a little bit in our case. And yeah, I'm happy I got to share it. I feel like I've been speaking so much.
Thank you again. Keep crushing it. And I hope to see you soon in person.
Thank you, Cappy.
This episode was produced by myself, along with Ian Cohen, Joel Yetton, and Sean Petrosian. Our digital media producer is Sarah McClellan-Mee. Our music has been composed by Goldford. Find him at iGoldford. As always, special shout out to my wife, Katie. If you have not started following me yet, you should. Find me across all social media at On Cappy's Plate, or go to BeyondThePlatePodcast.com and keep up to date with Beyond the Plate. Beyond the Plate is also on social at BT Plate Podcast. If you have a moment, we'd be grateful of your support by rating, reviewing, and even hitting that subscribe button to the podcast. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Drink, a production of Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy.